Before this story begins, I need you to think about something. Think about the photographs in your home. Not the ones on your phone, the ones on your walls. The frames you have walked past so many times you no longer consciously see them, but would feel their absence the way you feel a missing tooth. The faces, the moments, the evidence that your life happened and that you shared it with someone. Now imagine coming home after 2 weeks away and finding every single one of them gone. Not taken by a stranger who broke in. Removed by someone who sat at your dinner table for 6 years, called you family, and smiled warmly at your wife's funeral. That is what happened to Walter. At 71 years old, 14 months after burying his wife of 40 years, he walked through his front door and discovered that someone had erased Lorraine from every wall in the house they had built together. What they did not know, what no one knew except Lorraine, was that she had seen this coming. And she had left something hidden in his drafting desk that would change everything. Stay with me until the very end, because this is not just a story about what was taken. It is a story about what a woman left behind for the man she loved, from the far side of her own death. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. Every week we tell stories like this one. Stories about people who refuse to be erased quietly. Now, let us begin. I came home on a Tuesday afternoon in October after 2 weeks in Tennessee with my brother Earl. It was the first real trip I had taken since Lorraine passed 14 months before. I had not wanted to go. The house still held pieces of her. The smell of her hand cream, the slight indentation in her reading chair, the photographs on every wall that had carried me through the hardest year of my life. But Preston had called 3 times in 1 week urging me to visit Earl, saying the change of scenery would help my grieving process. He sounded so certain, so caring. So I packed a bag and drove. I pulled into my driveway at 2:30. The October afternoon was cool and golden, the kind Lorraine used to call perfect. I stepped through the front door and stopped. Something was wrong before I could name it. I looked at the hallway wall. For pale rectangles marked where frames had protected the paint for over a decade. The wall was bare. I moved through the living room, furniture rearranged, throw pillows I had never seen, a decorative bowl on the coffee table. I moved through the hall. The bedroom. Every room carried the same feeling, familiar in shape and foreign in everything else. Deanna appeared in the hallway with a calm smile. We wanted to freshen things up while you were away. A little surprise. I said nothing. I walked to the bedroom doorway. The nail above the dresser was still there. The pale rectangle was still there. But the 40-year wedding portrait of Lorraine and me was gone. Now let me tell you exactly what was on those walls, not in general terms but frame by frame, the way I still see them when I close my eyes. The wedding photograph from June of 1979. Lorraine in a simple ivory dress, laughing at something I said just before the photographer pressed the button. The laugh caught in full, open and entirely hers. The drawing Preston made at age 7, 4 stick figures labeled Dad, Mom, Me, Dog. We never owned a dog. Lorraine framed it anyway. 6 holiday photographs spanning 30 years. The beach, the mountains, a rainy trip to Washington where everything went sideways and we laughed the entire time. Lorraine's 50th birthday portrait, which she always claimed she hated. The 30-year anniversary clock she commissioned in secret over 6 months without saying a single word. Every single one of them was gone. When people say someone has been erased from a place, they mean it as a figure of speech. Standing in those rooms, I can tell you it was not a figure of speech. It was the most precise description possible of what had been done to Lorraine's memory in our home. I need to be honest about Deanna from the beginning because I spent too long not being honest about her, even with myself. Preston brought her to Sunday dinner for the first time 6 years ago. She was polished and calibrated in the way of someone who had thought carefully about the impression she wanted to make. She knew about architecture. She asked thoughtful questions about my career. She complimented Lorraine's cooking in the specific way that tells a woman her effort has genuinely been seen. I liked her immediately. Lorraine was quieter in her response. Lorraine never said anything critical about Deanna directly. That was not her character. But over the years I noticed small things I chose not to examine. The way Deanna's suggestions gradually stopped being suggestions and became conclusions. The way Preston's opinions, the ones I had known since he was a boy, became harder to find beneath whatever Deanna had already decided. During Lorraine's illness, Deanna was present and organized. She drove to appointments. She managed schedules. She was efficient in the way that looks like love and can sometimes be something else entirely. 2 months before Lorraine passed, I came home from the hospital to find Deanna in the kitchen on the phone, speaking very quietly. She ended the call the moment she heard me. She smiled and said she had been talking with a friend. I did not think about it again for a long time. Then there was the trip. Preston first mentioned Tennessee 6 weeks before I left, gently, just noting that Earl could use company. The second call, a week later, was more specific. The third included Deanna's offer to check on the house while I was away. Each piece felt like love. In my second week in Tennessee, I called Earl the way old brothers do. No particular reason. He mentioned, almost in passing, that Preston had called him 2 months earlier to ask whether he would be willing to have me visit for a while. 2 months before Preston ever raised the idea with me. The trip had been arranged before I was asked. I sat in Earl's spare room and thought about that for a long time. Now, sitting in my rearranged living room, every piece of it assembled clearly. Preston's calls. The precise timing. Earl's invitation prepared 2 months in advance. Deanna's offer to watch the house. It was not a trip. It was a schedule. On the third day after returning, I conducted a full inventory of the house. I am a retired architect. I spent 35 years measuring things precisely and documenting what was present and what was absent. I applied those same habits to every room. What I found went far beyond the missing photographs. Lorraine's handmade quilt, the one her mother started and she finished during a long winter we spent mostly indoors, was gone from the bedroom chest. A store-bought throw in a color Lorraine would never have chosen sat in its place. The shelf holding her 3 nursing recognition awards, covering 22 years of a career she was proud of, had been cleared. Her reading chair, a deep burgundy armchair she had owned since before we married, the one she sat in every single evening, was gone from its spot by the window. The floor still showed 4 small impressions where the legs had rested for 20 years. In the study cupboard where Lorraine kept a cedar box, 40 years of birthday cards, anniversary letters, and Preston's childhood drawings, the shelf was empty. I called Preston. He said Deanna had been decluttering on my behalf. He said holding on to these things was not healthy for my grieving process, and that a fresh space helps a person heal. He said it in the calm, patient tone of someone reading from a prepared position. I ended the call. I sat at the kitchen table in a house that no longer smelled like Lorraine's hand cream and old books, and I listened to how completely quiet everything had become. Then I stood up and went to find the cedar box. I searched for 3 days. Every cupboard, every shelf, every drawer in every room. The box was not in the house. On the 4th night, past midnight, I gave up on sleeping and went to the study. I sat at the old drafting desk I have owned since 1979. Lorraine used to bring me coffee at that desk when I worked late. She would set the mug at the corner, rest her hand briefly on my shoulder, and return to bed without a word. That was Lorraine. Presence without interruption. I opened the wide flat drawer at the bottom where I keep old blueprints. I pulled out the 1987 house plans. The original drawings for this house, the one I designed and we built together. Beneath the plans, my fingers found paper that did not belong there. A sealed envelope. My name on the front in Lorraine's handwriting. Below my name, 7 words written in smaller letters. Open this when the house stops feeling like ours. I sat completely still. The clock read 1:14 in the morning. I looked at Lorraine's handwriting on that envelope, and, for the first time since coming home to bare walls and a rearranged living room, I did not feel entirely alone. Then I opened it. Inside were 3 pages, dated 8 months before Lorraine passed. She began by saying she hoped I would never need this letter. She said that if I was reading it, something had gone wrong in the way she had quietly feared it might. She told me not to be angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. She had not wanted me to. She had wanted our final months to be peaceful, not spent watching for something she could not stop. Then she told me what she had noticed. 7 months before she passed, she overheard Preston and Deanna talking in the kitchen while she rested in her chair. They did not know she was awake. Deanna was discussing the house. Specifically, what would happen to it after Lorraine was gone, and whether a property this size was manageable for one person living alone. 3 weeks later, Lorraine found a business card on the kitchen counter. It belonged to a real estate staging company. On the back, in Deanna's handwriting, was a name and a phone number. Lorraine wrote that she had not confronted anyone. She did not want conflict in the time she had left. But she was a practical woman, and practical women make plans. She had taken the bus on a Tuesday morning to a community legal aid center 12 minutes from our house and spoken with an attorney named Vera Sutton. She described our property, our marriage, and exactly what she feared might happen. She brought documents. She answered every question Vera asked. She did not rush. At the bottom of the second page, she had written the center's full address and Vera's name. On the third page, her final line read, "Fight, Walter. Fight for every photograph." I read the letter 4 times before setting it down. My wife had loved me carefully enough to prepare for the worst from her sickbed. She had taken a bus alone, sat in a waiting room, and told a stranger the details of what she feared, so that I would not be left without a road when the time came. She had not left me defenseless. She had left me a map. I did not call Vera immediately. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was facing. The following evening, I opened the filing cabinet and reviewed every document signed since Lorraine's passing. Preston had brought them in batches across several months: estate papers, account transfers, insurance settlements, property records, 2 or 3 at a time. I had signed them at the kitchen table, while grief sat on my chest like a stone. I had trusted my son completely, and had not read every page as carefully as I should have. I had been a man in mourning, doing what the next form required, and I had not once thought to ask whether the next form was what it appeared to be. The title deed for the house was fully in order, the property solely in my name. I set it aside. Then, near the back of the folder behind the estate settlement papers, I found a document I did not remember signing. A property management authority form. 2 pages. It granted Preston and Deanna joint authority over the home's condition, contents, and presentation. The date placed it 10 months ago, 4 months after Lorraine passed, during the period when documents were arriving regularly and my concentration was fragile. I read every clause 3 times. The language was specific, not a standard template. One clause authorized decisions about the property's interior contents and presentation. A second clause near the bottom, written in careful formal language, could serve as the legal foundation for a future application to transfer full management authority out of my hands entirely. I sat with that document for a long time. Then I opened a fresh notebook, wrote the date at the top of the first page, and began writing everything I knew. Every date, every conversation, every detail I could recall with precision. I wrote until my hand ached and the notebook was no longer empty. The following morning at 8:30, I called the Community Legal Aid Center. I gave my name. I said I was calling about a consultation made by my late wife, Lorraine, approximately 14 months ago. I asked for Vera Sutton. There was a pause. Then, "Vera Sutton is still with us. Let me check her availability." The appointment was set for the following Thursday. I arrived 15 minutes early. The waiting room had metal chairs and a bowl of hard candy on the reception desk. The kind of place that exists because not everyone who needs legal help can afford to look anywhere else. Lorraine had come here alone on the bus on a Tuesday morning 14 months ago. She had sat in one of these chairs and waited, carrying everything she feared quietly inside her. I thought about that the entire time I waited. Vera Sutton was in her mid-50s, direct in manner, reading glasses pushed into her hair when she was not using them. She shook my hand and said simply, "Tell me what's happening." I told her everything. The trip to Tennessee. The bare walls frame by frame. The missing cedar box. The property management authority document found behind the estate papers. Then I placed Lorraine's letter on the desk between us. Vera read the letter slowly and completely. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Lorraine came in on a Tuesday afternoon," she said. "She sat exactly where you were sitting. She told me her husband was a good man who trusted people more than was always wise." A pause. She was right about every single thing. She opened her desk drawer and placed a file on the desk. Lorraine's file. Still exactly as it had been kept. I looked at it for a long time. 14 months ago, my wife had sat in this same chair and prepared for something she hoped would never happen. She had organized the information carefully, given Vera everything she needed, and left it all in that file, waiting for the morning I would walk through the door and sit down in her place. For the first time since coming home to bare walls and a rearranged living room, I did not feel entirely alone. Not because the problem was solved. It was not, but because I understood now that I had never been in this alone. Lorraine had been here first. Vera's team spent 4 days going through every document I had signed since Lorraine's passing. What they found was not careless error. It was a deliberate plan. The Property Management Authority form had not been prepared from a standard legal template. Someone with specific knowledge of elder property law had built it. Someone who knew exactly which language to use and precisely where to position things, so they would not be noticed by someone signing multiple documents in a state of grief. Vera showed me exactly how the document had been embedded. The first paper in the batch was an insurance beneficiary update. The third was a bank account transfer. The Property Management Authority was second, placed between two legitimate and necessary forms in a way designed to make it invisible to a grieving man working through a necessary stack of paperwork. She set the three forms side by side on the desk and showed me the sequence. Seeing it laid out that way, the deliberateness of it, was unlike anything I had felt in that entire process. The authority clause was broad enough to cover everything already done in the house. The removal of contents, the redecorating, all of it fell within the language authorizing decisions about the property's interior condition and presentation. The second clause was more serious. Vera set the document down carefully. That clause had been specifically drafted as a legal foundation, a starting point. Left unchallenged, it could support a future application to seek full management control over the property and eventually raise questions about my capacity to manage my own affairs. This was not a standard document, Vera said. It was built for a specific purpose by someone who understood exactly what they were constructing. She placed Lorraine's consultation notes beside my file on the desk. Your wife told me what to protect. She was thorough, she was calm, and she was right about all of it. She looked at me steadily across the desk. Let's begin. Within a week of Vera filing the preliminary challenge, the pressure started. Preston began calling every day. The calls followed a pattern consistent enough that I noted the tone before answering. One day concerned, asking whether I was sleeping, suggesting I speak with someone about my grief. The next day firmer, telling me I was misreading everything, that Deanna had acted out of love, that I was making things worse for the entire family. Deanna sent a long message. She wrote about how much she had given to this family during the hardest period any of them had faced. She said my suspicion was deeply wounding. She hoped I would reconsider before the damage became permanent. Within 10 days, two relatives called me on separate days, using remarkably similar language, to say they were worried. Preston had told both of them that I was struggling emotionally and making decisions that were not in my best interest. I wrote all of it down. Every call, every message, every date and word I could recall with precision. The notebook was filling steadily. I changed nothing about my visible daily routine. Mornings sketching at the drafting desk. Afternoon walks. Church on Sundays. I was calm not because the situation was manageable, but because I was operating from a position Lorraine had prepared 14 months before I needed it. Then Gloria knocked on my door. She had lived 3 houses down for 19 years. A retired school administrator. 31 years of writing things down accurately the same day they happened. She stood on the porch holding a plain spiral notebook, with the expression of someone who has been carrying something and has finally decided the time is right to put it down. She held it out quietly. I think you are going to need this. 12 pages. Exact dates the workers arrived, 3 days after I left for Tennessee. For separate occasions, she watched Deanna's car being loaded with bags and boxes from the back door. A specific overheard phone call on day 9. The old man's things are handled. The unit is already rented. Written down that same evening. A description of Deanna carrying a large black bag from the study on day 11. The time, what she was wearing, the direction the car turned when it left the street. Vera received Gloria's notebook the following morning and called me that evening. Your neighbor just built half the case. I called Preston and asked him to come to the house. I said only that I needed to see him and that he needed to come alone. He arrived on a Saturday morning looking guarded, but working not to show it. The expression of a man prepared for a conversation he cannot quite predict. I led him into the living room and said 2 words. Look at the walls. He looked. 15 pale rectangular outlines across 4 walls. The paint darkened at the outer edges where the frames had pressed for decades, the protected interiors lighter and cleaner, like negatives of what used to be there. The exact shapes of 40 years of our life together, outlined in their own absence. I placed Gloria's notebook on the table between us without a word. Preston picked it up and read the way a person reads something they do not want to be true. Slowly, returning to sentences, searching for an interpretation that never arrives. I watched his face. What I saw was not defiance. Not the measured, prepared tone of the phone calls. It was the expression Preston wore as a boy when he understood he had been part of something that could not be undone and was only beginning to grasp what that meant. He set the notebook down. He looked at the walls. He said nothing about my grief. Nothing about my age. Nothing about my capacity to manage my own affairs. He simply sat in the room where his parents had built 40 years of marriage, emptied now of every visible trace of it, and went very, very quiet. That silence told me more than any conversation could have. The following week Vera presented the formal legal challenge on 3 grounds. Undue influence. The document had been signed during a documented period of acute bereavement without independent legal counsel. Procedural irregularity. It had been deliberately embedded between 2 legitimate forms without being separately identified or explained. And the custom-drafted second clause, which Vera demonstrated bore no resemblance to any standard property management form and had been specifically constructed as the foundation for future control. The document was formally revoked. Through the discovery process, Vera's team identified a storage unit rented in Deanna's name at a facility 8 miles from my home. A court order required the unit to be inventoried. The cedar box was there, intact. Every letter, every card, every anniversary note, every crayon drawing, exactly as Lorraine had kept it. When Vera told me, I did not speak for a long time. Then I said, I need to go get it. She nodded once. I know, she said. I brought the cedar box home on a Friday afternoon. I set it on the kitchen table and opened it the way you open something you feared had been lost forever. Everything was there. The birthday card Lorraine wrote for my 40th. 4 pages, 40 things she loved about me, her handwriting running out of space before she ran out of reasons. The anniversary letters we exchanged every single year for 39 years, her handwriting and mine folded inside the same envelopes. Preston's crayon drawings from 1st grade, pressed flat and kept for 30 years by a woman who never once considered throwing them away. A small folded note she had tucked inside years ago that I had forgotten completely. 3 sentences in her handwriting, written on the back of a grocery receipt sometime in the late 90s. I held it for a long time. I sat at that table for a long time. Then I rehung Lorraine's 50th birthday portrait on the bedroom wall. The nail was still there, patient, exactly where it had always been. She always hated that photograph. I always loved it. Nothing about that had changed. Her reading chair came back 2 days later. I carried it to its spot by the window and sat in it that same evening. The armrests were worn smooth where her hands had rested for 20 years. The floor took it back as if it had never been moved. Preston and Deanna separated 3 months after the resolution. Preston called one Sunday afternoon and asked if he could come for dinner. I said yes. We sat at the kitchen table and talked in the careful way of 2 people rebuilding something that has been damaged but not destroyed. It was slow and honest and enough. I am sitting at the drafting desk as I tell you this. The same desk where Lorraine's letter waited for me in the dark, beneath 38-year-old blueprints, patient as she always was. The cedar box is open beside me. Her portrait is on the wall where it belongs. The house smells like itself again. I want to say one final thing before this story ends. Lorraine could not fight for herself at the end. She did not have the time or the strength. So she did the only thing she could. She left me the tools to fight when the time came. Quietly, without asking for anything in return, the way she had done everything in her life. If something in your home or your family does not feel right, if a document is being placed in front of you, if someone is encouraging you to sign something you have not had time to read carefully, if a room in your life is beginning to feel like it belongs to someone else, do not wait. Do not make the same mistake I made, trusting without looking. Lorraine cannot leave a letter in your drawer. That part is up to you. If you stayed with Walter from that October afternoon at the front door all the way to this moment, thank you. Truly and completely. You watched a man come home to find his marriage erased from every wall of the house he built. And you watched a woman who was no longer there reach back through a letter in a drawer and refuse to let that erasure stand. Here is what I need you to do right now, and all 3 of these matter more than I can say. 1. If something in your home, your finances, or your family does not feel right, please contact a community legal aid center before speaking to anyone else. You do not need money. You need to show up. Do it before you sign anything. Do it before anyone convinces you that your instincts are just grief talking or age talking or worry talking. Lorraine did it alone on a bus while she was dying, and it saved everything. You can do it too. 2. Drop a comment below right now. You do not need your name. You do not need to share more than you are ready for. Even the words, "I needed this today," tell the next person who finds this video at 2 in the morning that they are not alone. Someone is watching this right now from a situation they do not yet know how to name. Be the voice that helps them trust what they are feeling. 3. Subscribe to this channel and share this video with one person over 60 that you love. Not because it is a moving story, though it is. Because the truth inside it could protect everything they spent their life building before someone else decides it belongs to them. Walter is 71 years old. Lorraine's portrait is back on the wall. The cedar box is open on the desk. And the house, finally fully, feels like home again.